Xi Jinping probably released the virus intentionally. If he did not, if it was an accidental release, he intentionally let it go out from China. He used the Chinese New Year, the greatest period of travel from air travel from out
To
of China.
incubate and spread it.
That's right. Absolutely. You look back at the record of what they did. They used their agents in the World Health Organization to lie to the world.
And the Democrats followed that and said, keep the airlines coming in, go to Chinatown. Right. All of them came out and said that, including the Speaker of the House, Pelosi. And then they turn around and blame Trump.
That's right, which is ridiculous. It's going to backfire on them. And I tell you what to watch for next. It's this General Shough Chen's speech. Very important. Everybody should study it. They should look at this speech. General Shough Chen, the defense minister, using biological weapons. When you put that together with the two Chinese colonels who wrote the Unrestricted Warfare book in 1999, this is right out of their book. This is an asymmetrical weapon. China can adapt to it because they're a police society. They can use it to kill off their elderly. They want to do that. The government is ruthless. Here, we're trying to protect our elderly and vulnerable citizens, so it's costing us economically. But the West is inventive. It's able to adapt. But here's the interesting thing. Both China and Russia have closed their borders. If we look at this release as the beginning of a biological war, the closing of Russia and China's borders, not letting anyone from the outside, means that they could have prepared a more virulent strain of this virus.
Well, Jeff Nyquist is going to be with us here in this hour. Jeff Nyquist is author of The Origins of the Fourth World War, The Fool and His Enemy, and the New Tactics of Global War. He has been a columnist for WorldNet Daily, Sierra Times, Financial Sense Online. His writing is also published by the Epic Times, who are epic. jrnyquist.blog and jrnyquist.com. And here are the articles that he breaks down. Did Xi Jinping launch and intentionally release the COVID-19 virus? And other key reports. The secret speech of General Shough Tan, if I pronounce it right, and more. He wants to get into COVID-19, and did Xi Jinping intentionally launch it? Jeff, good to have you here with us. I'm going to try to let you have the floor in the rest of this segment to lay out what you currently think's behind all this, where you think it's going, the job you think Trump's doing, and then let's get into the Chinese globalist doctrine and how they've openly said they only country that would actually benefit from a nuclear war.
Yes, I think that when this outbreak first happened, I expected, and I was on your show in February, I thought that it was an accidental release from the Wuhan lab, but now, after analyzing all of the different data points, it seems to me that this release may have been intentional, and I'm going to lay out my reasoning. Now, Shough Chen, that Chinese general, former defense minister, I have put his secret speech from about 17 years ago on my website. It was translated by Epoch Times in around 2005. They published it at the time. It's a speech about using biological weapons on the United States, about China's emphasis on biological warfare, and about China's Lebensraum problem, China's overpopulation problem. Now, if we analyze this outbreak, this pandemic, there's a number of points that are interesting. The first one is China has had a one-child policy for half a century, in which they now have a bubble of elderly to take care of. Because when you do that for a long period of time, you have, now obviously the people didn't follow their rules because their population has grown 40% instead of growing by more than double in the last 50 years, but they have a large bubble of elderly population to take care of. And the one thing about this virus is it targets the elderly and the infirm, which in a socialist state system like China, where they take care of the elderly through the state budget, this is a tremendous way to getting rid of a lot of elderly people that they won't have to take care of. And you've probably seen some of the reports on Twitter out of China about elderly people being put in body bags and cremated while they're still alive. These terrifying stories are still circulating out of China. Then we have to look at the timing of the release of this virus. It happened right after President Trump had begun this tariff war and had backed China into a corner on the trade talks, and China had to give in. So China gives in the trade talks, and bam, this virus is released, and it's almost like a strike back at our market system. Look at what was happening. Trump had a great economy, things were going very good. All of a sudden, the market crashes. We're going up to heading up towards 30% unemployment. Then another point. I talked to a friend who teaches in a college in the Midwest in Chicago, and he told me that now in his school, it's an art school, art college. There's a lot of Chinese students, and they're from elite communist families. And he mentioned to me in January that a lot of those families their students were going home in the fall. And he said by the end of the spring term, they were all going to be gone. They weren't going to have any Chinese students next year. That's a very interesting data point. As if somebody in the Communist Party back in China, leading families, knew, all right, get your kids out of America. Then there's a provocation in Hong Kong. We had in the late summer, early fall, these independence movement in Hong Kong, which appears to be a provocation because many of the leaders of that movement have had contacts with Beijing, which were very suspicious. And now it turns out that thousands of Chinese anti-CCP, anti-communists are missing in China, thousands of them. There is this story out of Hong Kong that China deployed 400 secret police agents in the fall. They started hunting, kidnapping, and murdering anti-communist activists in Hong Kong. And then you see this testimony from I don't know if you saw it last month, our STRATCOM commander gave testimony before Congress in which he said we are facing the end of the shelf life of our nuclear deterrent and that we must invest enormous amounts of money to maintain our nuclear deterrent in the next few years. Otherwise, we're going to lose our deterrent. And his testimony was really interesting. So this attack coincides at a moment when our nuclear deterrent has aged. It's past its shelf life. We have to make a large investment to maintain it. And now our markets collapse, our revenues collapse. Do we have the money to maintain our nuclear deterrent? These are all data points which I'm watching, and there's others that are very alarming that suggest the Chinese government, Xi Jinping, knew exactly what he was doing.
I'm listening to you. I've been reading your articles. They're dead on because I'm researching the same stuff. I mean, it's clearly all pre-programmed, prepared. The Chinese students go home. They use this against Taiwan. They use it against their domestic groups. Bill Gates, who's big fans of Xi Jinping, has all the systems set up, all the new shows coming out about pandemics. He's got his Event 201 drill with the coronavirus killing 65 million people. That's happening October, November. You've got Lockstep, the Rockefeller Foundation, all these preparations. And then it just builds up to this and then is exported against us. And then Trump is blamed. It's all his fault. It's all being coordinated. The question is by who?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. If you look at the things that are coming out in China with the pandemic they're claiming they're having no new cases. This is complete fabrication. Nobody who's been following China closely believes China's numbers. There are these stories about them putting elderly in body bags and then in boxes and cremating them. There's stories about food not getting to the hospitals. So China has this very interesting information warfare campaign in China, which is dissuading the elderly from going to the hospital so that they simply die at home. They pick up the body, no muss, no fuss. They don't end up flooding the hospitals. And they say, oh, we don't have any problem. So they're going around, they're picking up their elderly, they're burning enormous amounts of body. I had this report from Hong Kong last week that the cremation capacity in China is so used that they are sending bodies to Hong Kong to be cremated, 80 to 90 a night. So because Hong Kong, which is following sort of strictures like we are, has contained it, but they have excess cremation capacity. So there's these indications that they, as a totalitarian society, which lies to its people, and also there's a massive purge going on within the Communist Party. There's a kind of power struggle between the black hand and the white hand, the Jiang Zemin faction and the Xi Jinping faction. And there's been, 3 assassination attempts in the past on Xi Jinping. And he is really trying to consolidate his power. And I believe he is a very ambitious leader. He has three heroes, Xi Jinping has. If you look at the literature, if you look at Stephen Mosher's work and Bill Gertz's work, you'll see that Xi Jinping admires Hitler, he admires Mao, and he admires Stalin. And in the Guinness Book of World Records, these are the three biggest mass murderers in history, and he admires them. He very famously has said to one of his American friends years ago, Xi Jinping said, "You know what's wrong with you Americans? You're too nice." Xi Jinping is not nice. And I think that it's very possible that this is some kind of plan. And the main question is whether Russia is going to be on board with them on this plan. I understand there's a lot of pressure being applied to Russia in Europe because Russia's initial propaganda campaign was detected in support of creating further mayhem in Europe in support of China's operation, which is definitely an information operation out of China too, because the Chinese are accusing us of creating the virus. And we know for a fact that these bat viruses were something the People's Liberation Army bioweapons program.
I have stacks of. I have Italian TV 5 years ago showing China admitting that they were injecting it into people trying to get coronaviruses to go viral. We'll be right back with Jeff Nyquist. Welcome back. I'm Alex Jones, your host. Really respected researcher and journalist Jeff Nyquist of jrnyquist.com is with us. Writes for great folks at Epic Times and others, WorldNet Daily. And he's just laying out the facts. So I'm going to continue to give you the floor right now about where you think this is going, how you think their war is going. Clearly, it's a deep state globalist allied with Communist China move. You're getting into Xi Jinping. Anybody can look this up. He, on record, does admire Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. He is an autocrat. He's an authoritarian. And the left totally protects him because they use China as a command base to carry out money laundering and other criminal activities. China bombs us with fentanyl. Enough was seized in Mexico, being brought in by the Chi-Coms, as you know, last year to kill 10.6 billion people if they all took, a overdose of it. That's the type of stuff they're hitting us with. And so give us any facets you want to cover. There's so many angles to this, but getting into Xi Jinping and his psychology and what you think he thinks of Trump.
Well, that's an interesting question. It's hard to get inside of Xi Jinping's mind, but well,
let's ask this. How was he able, even though his father was reportedly tortured by the Communist Party of China and Mao, how was he able to come from where he went and get into power?
Well, of course, in China, they have a very famous very deep political history. You've heard of Sun Tzu, there's Han Fei-tzu. These are Machiavellis on steroids. The cultural, political tradition of China is one of intrigue and conspiracy, double agents and infiltration. They were way ahead in this game. The earliest story of a false defector in history comes from China in the 19th century BC in the ancient records. So the Chinese have this very rich history of spies, counter-spies, infiltration, and they have for centuries lionized people who are agents of influence and traitors who get into a government and turn it on its head. These are the games. Of course, we know the story of Jiang Zemin, how he was humbled by Mao Zedong. And then after Mao's death, he struck down the Gang of Four and took power and led China in a different direction. Xi Jinping has a similar story because the turns of politics in China, with one group, in-party group, having the upper hand and then another, Xi Jinping is a major power player. The Communist Party of China, of course, as earlier leaders of China have said, is part of a secret front of socialist communist groups that exist worldwide. This is controversial to say, but it's very interesting that Russia and China are both supporting communist revolutions and regimes around the world right now. If you talk about the end of the Cold War, the defeat of communism, wait a minute. Nepal became a communist country some years ago, taken over by Maoists. Angola, the communists won the civil war in Angola. Congo had a revolution in '97. South Africa, the ANC is a front for the Communist Party of South Africa. We have Venezuela, Nicaragua. Daniel Ortega is in power there. Around the world, communist revolutions have been taking place quietly behind the surface. And Russia and China both have troops in Venezuela. They're both supporting Nicaragua. They're both supporting Cuba. On the 100th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution, you can look this up. Vladimir Putin gave a speech before an organization of communist youth and students, and there were like 10,000 of them gathered there at Sochi. And he said, "We are behind you. We believe in you. You are the future," were the words in his speech. You can watch that speech if you want. It's a very peculiar speech. I have talked to defectors over the years. I have studied this, and it takes me back to a defector named Anatoly Golitsyn, who wrote a book called New Lies for Old in 1984, in which he predicted everything that happened from 1989 down to the present. By 1994, nearly 94% of his predictions had been proven correct. He predicted the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Warsaw Pact, the collapse of the Communist Party Soviet Union, the advent of democracy in Russia. But he said it was all a strategy. It was a planned collapse. They planned it for 40 years, 30 plus years. They initiated the plan together with China. That the Sino-Soviet split was part of the plan, according to Golitsyn. And there are so many things that have come true. He predicted that after they initiate this plan, if the West believed that the changes in the Soviet Union were legitimate, that we would lose track of our nuclear arsenal. We would not renew it, which we haven't done, and that our deterrent would start to become weaker and weaker. Meanwhile, China and Russia, and this goes directly to the terrifying testimony of our STRATCOM commander last month. He said, while we were allowing our nuclear deterrent to rot and age, China and Russia have been intensively modernizing their nuclear forces. And so if we lose that nuclear deterrent, the world belongs to Russia and China. They will be able to dictate.
Let's be clear about this. Obama and the globalists have been debilitating the U.S. and demoralizing us by design, and then preparing at the college level the Maoist operating system. I don't just say that. Every college, as you know, the public needs to know, that's not hyperbole. The Maoist model is the model of a youth rebellion, and Antifa's all Maoist, and you've got the Confucius societies and the head chemist at Harvard caught being a Chi-Com agent. I mean, the infiltration's been massive, and they're really pissed that Trump's starting to, I think, turn the tide against them as we identify this. But if Trump just points out that, no, Xi Jinping's horrible, he's terrible, he infiltrated our country, Obama and others were on his payroll, Hillary's on the payroll, Americans will unify behind that, because this is real fifth generational warfare, and I think we can pretty much reverse this quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting what President Trump has done. I see a kind of strategy in him saying, Putin is my friend, Xi Jinping is my friend, because that makes it harder for them to attack the United States if the president is calling them a friend. It sort of puts them in a difficult position to commit the kind of actions that they want to commit. So it's a very clever strategy. And then to back them into a corner, Trump's unexpected election was a game changer. If Hillary Clinton had gotten in, you can imagine she would have continued the disarmament. There would have been no even small program to renew our nuclear warheads. We're going to start being able to produce nuclear warheads in 2025, and hopefully that can be accelerated. I think that's what the STRATCOM commander wants, is a bigger commitment. And the Chinese and Russians, having gained such tremendous advantages, nearing the point where they were tipping the balance of power in their favor, suddenly saw Trump coming in, putting more money into the military, playing the trade war game with them, taking away their unfair
Well, it's like Trump said. He said, we've been in a trade war with China for 40 years and losing. I'm not starting a trade war. We're simply fighting back.
That's right. Absolutely. And of course, this was too much for the Chinese. So what is their reaction? Bam, biological attack, COVID-19 virus, flatten our markets, deprive us of the money we need.
And Trump knows what to do, flood it with cash, even though it'll cause problems later. We'd be in a depression right now if he didn't do it.
Right. Well, we have to, the president is guarding against we're going to get hit by a hard deflation because of the bursting
of all these
financial
People are worried
bubbles.
about inflation. In the short term, it's being a deflation because, well, you're smart cookie. Let's talk about that with Mr. Nyquist. When the people don't know history, they're doomed to repeat it. Well, I do know about history, and I do know about biology, and I do know about authoritarianism. And I see our media, our supposed big tech companies worshiping Xi Jinping. I mean, Apple runs slave factories. They have Uyghur slaves building components. That's confirmed. And people go, it's okay, Tim Cook's gay. I mean, as long as you're trendy and gay, I mean, you can have death camps. As long as you just wear a little non-threatening black T-shirt and go, oh, hi, I'm Tim Cook, oh, hi. You have a basement of dead kids, I guess it's okay. It's just crazy. So looking at some of your other points with Mr. Nyquist, who's here with us right now, who writes for Epic Times and other great publications like WorldNet Daily, when you get into one of the other notes you sent me about the worldview of this particular general you talk about, how does that tie into all of this? And again, how do you think Trump's doing getting America in a realist footing against what's unfolding? And now that I think about it, before we went to break, we were talking about the economy and what Trump's done. I don't like all this giant spending. I don't like where it goes, but he's starting to federalize the Federal Reserve. That's a way to take it over, I guess. I see that as positive. But no, I'm not an economist, but I do study these things. With unemployment exploding, with tens of millions out of work each month that were shut down, and big corporations in the states, and the left are saying they're going to keep it shut down for another 100 days. I've talked to a lot of corporate people. What they've been told from the higher-ups is 2 months bare minimum, probably at least another 100 days. Bill Gates is in the news saying he wants 100 days starting yesterday, and he seems to be calling the shots as the globalist science officer running so much of this. So from the perspective of that, with the economy stalling, and they do put out, this $4 trillion from the U.S. and a couple, trillion more out of the Federal Reserve, and then promise $14 trillion more in liquidity. Will that cause inflation or will that cause deflation?
I think that they've balanced it. So I think it's hard to say exactly because we've got these bubbles bursting. So there's the danger of a deflation, a deflationary depression. But by this spending bill, and we have not been as inflationary with the dollar as the Europeans have been with their currencies. And the dollar, we'll see how it goes, but it should have a counteracting effect on the deflationary cycle. We're going to have more unemployment, of course, as the economy adjusts. Remember, economies are based on human behavior, which is habitual, human economic decisions, and those kind of decisions are going to be changing. So we're going to be in a period of adaptation, and it is not going to go back to the way it was. I think that we can make that statement because Xi Jinping probably released the virus intentionally. If he did not, if it was an accidental release, he intentionally let it go out from China. He used the Chinese New Year, the greatest period of travel from air travel from out of China,
to incubate and spread it.
That's right. Absolutely. You look back at the record of what they did. They used their agents in the World Health Organization to lie to the world.
And the Democrats followed that and said, keep the airlines coming in, go to Chinatown. Right. All of them came out and said that, including the Speaker of the House, Pelosi. And then they turn around and blame Trump.
That's right, which is ridiculous. It's going to backfire on them. And I tell you what to watch for next. It's this General Shough Chen's speech. Very important. Everybody should study it. They should look at this speech. General Shough Chen, the defense minister, using biological weapons. When you put that together with the two Chinese colonels who wrote the Unrestricted Warfare book in 1999, this is right out of their book. This is an asymmetrical weapon. China can adapt to it because they're a police society. They can use it to kill off their elderly. They want to do that. The government is ruthless. Here, we're trying to protect our elderly and vulnerable citizens, so it's costing us economically. But the West is inventive. It's able to adapt. But here's the interesting thing. Both China and Russia have closed their borders. If we look at this release as the beginning of a biological war, the closing of Russia and China's borders, not letting anyone from the outside, means that they could have prepared a more virulent strain of this virus. You notice the virus has 4 inserts, one that attacks the lungs, the heart, the kidneys, and the testicles. If they have a slightly different genetic version of it, they could unleash this on us. It could have a much higher death rate, causing a much deeper panic in the country. And since they've closed their borders, it won't blow back on them. It's very alarming to me that they've totally closed off their borders. They're still having cases. They're lying about having cases, but they're containing it through their own system, as I explained
That's
earlier.
right. Let's be clear. They let people leave while not letting people come in. Very, very suspicious. And as you said, then they can release a more virulent strain that's covered by the earlier strain and have their operatives release it. And that's what the Army Times and others are reporting, is they've been catching all these Chi-Coms coming in and out of the United States beforehand. And the FBI warned, this is American Military News, of Chinese researchers transporting disease samples into the U.S. before coronavirus. And they caught the other Chinese agents trying to get them out. So this is serious. And if this is the opening salvo in a war, what do you expect to come next?
Well, like I say, a more virulent strain. The thing is, the United States policy is to launch nuclear strikes in response to a biological attack. Now you have a situation where deterrence has failed. I think the U.S. government now, they know that this virus was engineered. They're not saying it publicly. They don't want to scare the public.
But let me stop you. You're actually right. Yeah. You had Senator Cotton and Hawley and others come out and say, we think they probably released it. There'll be a day of reckoning. Then 10 Downing Street said, we are infuriated. You will pay. There will be a reckoning. We're going to make you a pariah state. We're going to cut you off. You never see the British talking like that. I mean, there's almost, in the statements out of the Pentagon and out of the Senate Intelligence Committee, is very threatening to China. And so I think they're telegraphing they know.
I think that they know that we're at the beginning of a war. How much this war will escalate, where will it go? The ultimate end would be if it went completely out of control, nuclear, of course. It depends on how stable Russia and China are, how confident their leaders are, whether the power struggles within those countries devolve and they back away from this kind of strategy. But
and
right
if
now,
the globalists realize how reckless this is and stop being all in with China.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting because all these big money people who've climbed into bed with China, look at what they've done. They have facilitated our enemy getting control of our supply chain. Right now, Xi Jinping threatened the world and said, oh, well, we'll cut off your pharmaceuticals. We make your antibiotics. We make your high blood pressure medication. If you don't trade with us, if you don't open yourselves up, you talk about an opium war. They're using pharmaceuticals. It's a pharmaceutical war.
But if Trump is just honest that they're holding us hostage, we're not wimps, it will break the Xi Jinping's political power. And if we then focus that on the Democrats and the globalists, they're politically done. If Trump uses this now with information warfare truth, by being absolutely honest, America will line up behind the president. But only if he's bold, I believe.
Yeah, and he has to be. And, of course, he's a person of instinct. He's a guy who, I mean, look at what his sister said about him. The people who really knew him thought he was going to win the election when nobody thought he had a chance. His sister said, well, what I learned when I was a child was you don't play games with Donald because Donald always wins. And his wife said something similar. And I think that the Chinese have decided to play a game, a very dangerous game with Donald Trump. And he is, a lot of things in the world, it isn't necessarily how intellectually astute you are. That's important, of course. But instinct seems to be the king. And this president has
because that's the deep reservoir of the entire genetic memory and instincts and learning of the subconscious brain. That's the total expression of real intelligence is instinct. We just call it instinct, as you know.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, he shows that in spades, and how he was able to defeat his Republican rivals for the nomination and then go on to defeat Hillary Clinton despite the whole...
We got to go to break. I'm going to do a few more minutes with you, then I'm going to take calls, folks. Stay with us. Jeff Nyquist is here. He's going to go in a few minutes. We'll jam in some of your calls, and I appreciate calling. Then Paul Watson takes over in the fourth hour. Jeff, in closing, other key points you'd like to add, advice to the American people, advice to President Trump, because you're dead on in your analysis, according to my research. I mean, we're in the opening salvo of a really serious war with our corrupt elites throwing their lot in with the Communist Party that's killed over 100 million people in their own country. I mean, Xi Jinping, all these guys, in their vision and in their scope of their party, dwarf Hitler and Stalin combined.
Yeah, it's very important for us to be unified and to support our leader, President Trump, and to turn against any of these kind of partisan criticisms coming from the left. The left has got to retreat. They've got to pull in their horns. We have to be unified. We cannot be divided as a country.
That's right. They're useful idiots thinking their America-hating thing is going to empower them. They're the morons that lower the drawbridge for the barbarians. The first people the barbarians kill is the traitors.
That's right. Well, they have lowered the drawbridge. You look at Obama's administration, you look at Clinton's administration. It was outrageous that Hillary Clinton should attack this president over not being prepared when she and her husband did nothing to prepare this country for a biological war that we are now in. So these people were not prepared. They had their time in office. They were on the left. They supported these same regimes. Look at Chinagate. Look at what Hillary Clinton and her husband did. The money they took from China, the W-88 warhead going to China, all of the technology moved through the Commerce Department, the suspicious death of Ron Brown that Kathleen Janowski, the Navy medical photographer, revealed about the .45 caliber hole in Ron Brown's head at the Dubrovnik crash. I mean, we've got so many scandals. These people are so dirty. Our country has been so infiltrated by the enemy. We have to, as a country, pull together. And I think nationalism, national feeling, the things that Trump has been talking about, a war is going to bring the country together. And these people are going to be exposed. And all of these billionaires who've gotten into bed with our enemies are going to be exposed. That's what's got to happen. That's what's coming.
So what's the title of this interview? We're live now, but I'm going to archive it to band.video very soon. This afternoon, people should spread it. It's excellent. The research is all there, your article, the links. China or Communist Party China or the China has initiated biological war against the United States. Evidence mounts. Or Xi Jinping has launched a biological war against the free world. Evidence mounts. Or what would the headline be?
Yeah, China initiates biological attack on the West. Prepare for more.
Or World War IV has begun?
Well, World War III, World War IV comes after. But
well, you know, the CIA calls the Cold War World War III, so everybody thinks World War III is the new one coming. But yeah, technically, they're not officially called it World War III, so I guess it would be World War III.
It depends. It depends on whether you think the Cold War ever really ended. If you take the analysis of Golitsyn, if you look at there were 3 defectors who said that they were planning to collapse the Warsaw Pact. It was Anatoly Golitsyn, Jan Shana, the high-level Czech defector, and Zadislav Bittman. They all mentioned this. They predicted this. They talked about knowledge of it, that the Russians were preparing for a liberalization in the communist bloc. And of course, in some respects, the Stalinist ideology had failed. They needed to have a change, but they were not giving up on their attempt to dominate the world, that the party would continue to operate under the surface of nomenclatura. We've seen, as the head of Stratcom testified last month, the Russians never stopped modernizing their nuclear forces. When we, did away with our tritium plants, did away with our hydrogen bomb manufacturing.
Well, let's do this. Come back again next week, and let's get into your big geopolitical overview, Mr. Nyquist. I really appreciate the time, but say that headline one more time. We're going to go with that headline you said. It was China launches biological war against the West. More to come?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now it's easier than ever to have band.video on your iPhone. Simply go to band.video with your Safari browser. Then you click the share button at the bottom of the screen. When the menu comes up, you simply click Add to Home Screen. It will then ask you to name the app. I suggest band.video. You will now have band.video app on your home screen, despite the fact that Tim Cook tried to stop it. The globalists think you're lazy, but by taking a little bit of action, you can override them, have the app, and then tell others about it so they can get the app. So it's up to you whether you want to defy big tech and click the share buttons below on your email, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, however you want. Be sure and share band.video. A lot of listeners and viewers are confused by what I've been saying. So that's my fault. They say, Alekkz, you said this virus is really deadly, man-made, and it's a serious issue 8 weeks ago. Now you're saying it's overhyped and is a psychological warfare weapon and that everything's okay. Which is it? That's not what I'm saying. This is a complex, fast-moving issue, and it's my fault that I get caught in the weeds and go into little minutia. Let me just be very simple and boil it down as succinctly as possible. From our best research, this is man-made, and it was released to distract from the fact that Xi Jinping and the Chi-Coms were getting kicked out of Taiwan and had their own big protests on the mainland. Then it came to Europe and the United States, and it does kill a lot of sick and old people, and that's a big problem. And we know that it mutates, and we know that it reinfects. We know there's a lot of issues to be concerned about. But as we discovered more, we found out the Chi-Coms had exaggerated the number of deaths to create fear and work with Western media that was pro-Xi Jinping and pro-Chi-Com, but anti-Trump, anti-America, and that indeed it was an economic warfare weapon. That was its main thrust. Doesn't mean the weapon doesn't kill people. But if you're gonna release a bioweapon, a lot of times you wanna release one that's weak so that you know what it's gonna do and doesn't blow back on you too hard. It's more of a simulant to scare people. So we now know what's going on. But when it comes to Democrats locking down states and cities and having their own corporate governmental strike against America to shut down the economy, and with them now saying they're gonna hold the states hostage, even when Trump tries to turn the economy back on, and even when Trump sends the stock market back up, you know this is a bureaucratic, corporate, governmental civil war, and it's the next chapter in them trying to remove our populist president. And it tells me that with the fake Russiagate and the fake Ukraine gate, and now this, if they fail taking him out with this, they're only gonna escalate even more. And so my prognosis into the future is very bad. If Trump and the Pentagon and the Justice Department don't get reformed and start taking out these globalists who are working for the Chi-Coms and foreign powers. They're not American citizens. They're trying to create a collapse. They're bragging they want a depression. And the dereliction of duty by President Trump, I'm just gonna say it, I love Trump, he's done a great job, he's been under total attack, but he can't get control of the Justice Department. And so we've all done a terrible job there. And it is what it is, it's gonna get a lot worse. You can see the escalation, how they just keep doubling down exponentially each time. And so a lot of people are feeling really good. Oh yeah, the virus probably isn't that bad, Alekkz, thanks. You know, we believe you. That's not even the issue. The issue is they're talking about canceling the election. The issue is the left's trying to foment riots. The issue is the martial law and the cashless society being announced and all of this insane crap and known treatments that doctors try to give patients being blocked by Democrat governors. It's insane to confirm how crazy and criminal these people are and how they do work for the globalists and are out to get the country. We've always known that, but now it's incredibly obvious. So in future reports, I'm gonna lay out why I'm so concerned, but namely, governments and others are hoarding food because I've talked to the supply chain experts, it's running out. And when people all stay home, that's what happens, and it could trigger a permanent depression. And so the next toilet paper is food, and this you gotta have to live. We're covering it all live at band.video, EnPhoWarzz.com/show.